The light was on at Grandma's house. I had been living in a 3-story duplex with my extended family for quite some time. There was always food on the table, food in the fridge, and Grandma was the master chef. But my brothers and cousins had moved away, and I had a second-floor master bedroom. Coming down to eat one evening, I asked Grandma what was for dinner. Hodgepodge, she replied. Hodgepodge meant some of everything. This rang a bell in my head, because I remember being asked what was my favorite meal in my mysterious phone conversation with a representative from the Darling Building. The Darling Building was where I was supposed to make an appointment to see a family counselor. You see, I had gotten myself into some trouble, pursuing a romantic encounter with the tall, blonde, bobby-cut, blue-eyed, mousy, and vivacious Suzanne. My life was coming into focus. The Darling Building was arranging an intervention. So, when the word hodgepodge was spoken, it was a coded phrase. Grandma might be fixing me a dinner for two. The food was cooking on the stove, and I was standing in the dining room under the chandelier. But the lights were too bright, like in a theatrical production. Grandma and my mother were seated at opposite ends of the table. Maybe then it's the devil in you, Grandma said matter-of-factly of my observation. A lawyer would be joining them that evening. Her name was Pat. I retreated back to my side of the house and waiting for the doorbell to ring. Was Suzanne involved in this charade? Pat arrived. She was a white-haired, bobby-cut firebrand. She knew the law. She was recommended to my mother by another attorney friend after putting the house up for sale. It was in probate. I was called down to speak with her about what had been happening between me and Suzanne. Suzanne did want to meet with me, but under certain conditions. This was one of them. She wanted to know whether I was her stalker or her admirer. Pat interviewed me to find out. Having just come from the scene of a car accident, Pat's blouse and pantsuit were ruffled, dusty, and blood-stained. Suzanne told me that you are an enterprising young man. Is this a sincere ploy to win her heart by bombarding her with your affections, or is scaring the crap out of her by meeting her at her job, writing letters, and leaving a rose at her apartment, your cry of mental distress? Pat inquired. Seated at the dining room table was my Uncle Reggie. He was a security agent at the local playhouse. He lived in the other master bedroom on Grandma's side of the house. What did you mean by stating that this letter will self-destruct? She pressed. It was a reference to a running cartoon gag on a spy show. I realized that Suzanne didn't see the humor. What would it take to bring her into my life? The Darling Building was the matchmaker. The family counselor would act as a surrogate. I could express my affections and be done with this madness. When asked in the phone conversation, I preferred a male social worker, knowing that I would get the female most resembling Suzanne in this classified role reversal. Her name was Beth Ann, but she had a naturally growing blonde mustache under her bespectacled mousy nose. She wore a white lab coat and crossed her legs, leaning into me, trying to figure me out. My interview with Beth had concluded, and I was sent to the Darling building. Was it further interrogation? She removed her glasses and lifted my chin, kissing me once. It was for my reaction to stimuli. I was her specimen. I kissed her back. Good. Impulse to choke, source of affection, negative. My next reaction was to candles and knives. Was I drawn to light the candle or draw the knife? I lit the candle. We had our romantic dinner for two, courtesy of Grandma's hodgepodge dinner selections. Returning to the now darkened the house. I realized that everyone had gone to bed. I slipped in unnoticed and sojourned to my master bedroom. Thinking about what had transpired that day, the setup, the interview, and the rendezvous, I was content in knowing that my madness had come to a peaceful conclusion. No charges were filed. Suzanne was safe and I was gratified. I hear stumbling and the doors adjacent to the hallway between sides opening downstairs. It's Grandma, and she says that she's trying to find herself. What does she mean by that reasoning? My mother hears the commotion and jogs down the steps. She said that she will be sleeping next to Grandma's bedroom from now on, since Reggie works at night and escorts her back to her side of the house. Pat is coming back tomorrow to conduct an exit interview, so I should be ready. The morning day breaks, and I am ready to meet Pat. She saunters to the front door. The doorbell rings, and I answer it. Several men from the fire department are with her. Was this about the car accident last night? Why would she still be involved? Duh, she's a lawyer, and they do represent accident victims. The paramedics are also accompanied by men in white lab coats. Were they from the Darling building? What exactly is this exit interview about? Joe, how have you been sleeping? Is there a funny taste in your mouth? A man in a white lab coat asked. My grandma is the one who had trouble sleeping last night, I respond. Her meal was delicious. It was the best meal I ever ate. How long have you been living here? Another man in a lab coat continues to ask. I've been living here all of my life, since the year I was born. My mom is leaving me this house in my name when Grandma passes on, I reckoned. Pat intercedes. Joe, these men are here to take you to a better place. It's a better situation. Suzanne will visit you there. Excited by this news, I'm perturbed. Why couldn't Suzanne visit me here at Grandma's house, I ask myself. This family arrangement is what must have been discussed at the intervention. I go quietly, as to not make a scene, but the house was a bone of contention. I threatened family visitors, saying that when my mother was away, I was in charge of the property. I cut the front lawn, but police were summoned once, when an obnoxious neighbor walking her dog let it defecate, forcing me to grab hold of the leash to rein it in. These incidents brought out my feelings of distrust and feelings to assault. Grandma was wise, saying it wasn't nice to fool with Mother Nature. Grandma said they were her visitors and that she pays rent. But I forced them to relent and leave. The neighbor called the police, reporting an assault, but there was no marks on her forearm. The house housed spirits, both dead and undead, angry and vengeful, loving and wise. The framed family pictures, a neatly and arranged assortment, faced her favorite chair at the dining room table, like ghosts who were happy that they could never leave. An ambulance was parked across the street. The fireman helped me to get into the vehicle after carrying me down the front walkway and steps with my arms around their shoulders. I was overwhelmed. "Joe, you're going to have to carry your weight. You're too heavy leaning on the both of us." They sat me down in a black recliner and took my vitals. Haunted by an unrequited love for Suzanne's involvement, Grandma's house had been a place of passion, passionate food preparations and passionate whimsy. The whatnot shelves stocked with knickknacks and collectibles like snow globes, nested dolls and figurines made in occupied Japan. The kitchen stocked with spices, flour, sugar, and dry boxes with canned goods. If only Suzanne could have seen the love that was in that home and in my heart. Pat and my mother would follow behind us. I could see the car from inside the back window of the ambulance. What would happen to Grandma's house? The light was on, but nobody was home. I was told that she has passed years ago. Her spirit inhabited that domicile after her residence was abruptly moved, according to my mother's wishes, into a new single-family mansion. She did not want to move, and when she died, her spirit returned. Pat had been killed in an auto accident on her way to interview me. She walked away as one of the walking dead. I was committed to a behavioral health facility because of insanity. I had punched and kicked my mother and grandma, sending them to the hospital because of my disbelief in this paranoid, delusional charade. Memories of my mother and Uncle Reggie were hallucinations, figments of a diseased mind. I was still living in Grandma's house, unable to distinguish fact from fantasy. I visit her grave on her birthday and homegoing. The light was on at Grandma's house, but nobody was home.